Professor Ferreira do Amaral, I think you also have a view on more specific problems on the Portuguese economy rather than on the general banking system, so I would invite you to explain this.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Paz Ferreira, for this kind invitation. Don't be alarmed, I will not speak about Portugal leaving the euro, although I think we should. But I'll rather talk about 3 points that, from my point of view, are explain why austerity in Portugal is not giving results that supposedly were expected. First point is that the austerity policy looks at things from the financial side. And when it looks at the real side of the economy, it usually assumes that if you reduce public deficit, if you stabilize the balance of payments, then by that factor we'll have a restructuring of our economic, of our productive structure, and then things are already better in this field, and the potentiality of growth will increase, and so on. I think that this is not the case for the Portuguese economy, mainly because we have a deep crisis in our productive structure, and a crisis that is not a recent crisis, is an accumulation of distortions in our economic structure. And those distortions are seen in the high proportion of non-tradable productions vis-à-vis tradable goods productions. This was, as far as I can see, a result of having an over-evaluated currency from even before the creation of the euro, from the middle of the 90s. An over-appreciated currency incentivizes the business in non-tradable goods and disincentivizes investment and production in tradable goods, and this was what really happened from these 15 or something years since the 90s. I don't think that the austerity policy will have effects on this economic crisis, or at least positive effects, because what we need really is a huge volume of investment in the production of tradable goods. And to have a high investment in production of tradable goods, we need the appropriate incentives to the debt. And I think the incentives that supposedly the austerity policies will give, mainly the internal devaluation, I will talk more about that later on, are not appropriate for that. Really, what we have seen in these 2 years of austerity is that investment has declined, and not only housing investment, if that was the case, it was not so serious, but investment even in tradable goods and productive sectors in general. So we can solve the financial problems in balance of payments and even in public sectors, perhaps, but it will not be sustainable, because our economic structure will be a real obstacle to that. We cannot have sustainable conditions for growth if we don't change the proportion of sectors, tradables and versus vis-à-vis non-tradables, and this will take time. So I'm very skeptical about the possibility of solving the financial problem in a sustainable way. Second thing, for Portugal, even if we look only at the financial problems, we have two financial problems. One is the overall indebtedness of the economy, which is an accumulation for a long time of foreign deficits in the current account balance and the accumulation of foreign debt. And then we have the public sovereign debt problem, which is also increasingly difficult to handle. If we want to solve, even, as I said, not considering the real economy problems, if we want to solve both this problem with an austerity policy as we have been implementing, we have two conflicting objectives. Because we can reduce, and we've done that really, reduce the deficit in the balance of payments. We've done that. But we achieved this result by reducing domestic demand. It was the way to reduce imports. Of course, there was also an increase in exports, but without without reducing domestic demand, we shouldn't be able to balance our current account deficit. But as domestic demand declined sharply, public revenues declined, and public expenses increased because of unemployment, which suffered a very rapid increase. And so the results in what concerns the public deficit are disappointing, because with all these austerity measures, we achieved a very non-satisfactory reduction in public deficit, and this, I think, has to do with the recession due to the reduction in domestic demand, mainly in what concerns private consumption, but also investment. So I think those two objectives for the Portuguese economy are conflicting objectives, and I don't see how the austerity measures can solve both problems simultaneously. Third point is about the internal devaluation. Internal devaluation is considered a substitute for exchange rate devaluation. I think this is incorrect. It's not really a substitute, mainly because internal devaluation does not discriminate as exchange rate depreciation does not discriminate positively tradable goods. It's something that can reduce if it is done on wage costs, reduce wage costs all over the economy, and does not give a special incentive to production and investment in tradable goods. And secondly, because wealth effects are very different from exchange rate depreciation. So I think this is incorrect to say, as I think the Troika says, well, you cannot have an exchange rate depreciation, so please make an internal devaluation. And this has limits, and for the Portuguese economy, those limits are very clear. First, we have very highly indebted households. And so if you reduce too much households' incomes, mainly wage incomes, we will have certainly problems in the banking sector. And this is happening now, and the Bank of Portugal is warning us about the effects of too high reduction in household incomes being by reducing wages or other way. Secondly, Portugal's employment in the Portuguese economy was and is very dependent on domestic demand. This is easily seen and could be seen even before the crisis, looking at sectoral production, sectoral employments, and so on. A large majority of our employment is in activities that are directed for domestic demand. So if you reduce incomes too rapidly, what we will get is a very high and very rapid increase in unemployment. That was what happened. There was, I think, some ideas that this would be a complete surprise for the Troika and so on. I don't think so. I think any study before the fact would show that a decline in domestic demand would mean a very rapid increase in unemployment. And this is, from my point of view, not only a short-term problem, but will be a very long-term problem, because unemployment is now becoming more and more structural. Of course, there are people, mainly young people, that leave the country, but people that have not the possibility or the opportunity to leave the country will be structurally unemployed, and probably they'll never have any other job in the future. And this is a problem not only from the economic side of the question, but is also a problem for demographic sustainability, because as Portugal was already a rapidly aging society, with the leaving of young people and decline in births and so on, I think in longer term, the sustainability, the demographic sustainability of Portugal is at stake. So, for all these 3 points, mainly the real problem, from the real crisis, which from my point of view is the economic crisis, the two objectives that are conflicting in what concerns financial questions, and also the limits to internal devaluation, I think that is my point of view. Portugal has no solution without other instruments of policy, and that, as I said, I will not speak about leaving the euro. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor.